Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Islam Study Circle. As per our tradition, we will first study some portion from the Quran, and then we'll have a session on Hadith, and then the Bible, and finally we'll be having a discussion on an important topic, and then the session will be open for a Q&A. So, starting off with the first of these segments, which relates to to a portion of the Quran. The portion that we are going to study today is from Surah Saf, the 61st Surah of the Quran, and verses 10 to 14, and they have been titled as Supporting the Cause of Religion. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu hal adullukum ala tijaratin tunjikum min azabin alim تؤمنون بالله ورسوله وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون يغفر لكم ذنوبكم ويدخلكم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ذلك الفوز العظيم وأخرى تحبونها نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى ابن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله. Believers, shall I guide you to a deal that will save you from a grievous torment? Profess faith in God and His Messenger, and fight for God's cause with your wealth and persons. This would be better for you if you understand. As a result, God will forgive your sins and admit you to gardens below which streams flow. He will lodge you in splendid abodes in eternal gardens. This is great success. And He will also grant what you desire, help from God and a victory near at hand. And O Prophet, give these glad tidings to the faithful. Believers, be God's helpers, the way Jesus, son of Mary, said to His disciples, Who will be my helper in the cause of God? The disciples replied, We are God's helpers. So this verse or these verses, in fact, of Surah Saf, they are actually calling the Muslims who were living at that time under the oppression of the Quraysh rule, of course, and had recently migrated to Medina, where a new state had been established. That, of course, now it was the need of the hour that if there is a fight between the believers and the disbelievers as per the law of the Almighty, then they will not show any slackness, and they will not run away from the battlefield in any instance, in any circumstances, nor show their back, but in fact they will be fighting with their wealth and their persons. Of course, wealth is being used here as a condition, because in those times there were no standing armies, and people who would have to fight for the cause of God were required to bring in their own weapons and of their own conveyances. So this is why it is said that they will be fighting for the cause of God with their wealth and with their persons. And the result of this would be that they will be admitted into gardens of paradise, beneath which streams will be flowing. And obviously, this is great success as far as the hereafter is concerned. But God says that this hereafter success is not something that is only being promised. In this world also, they will be victorious. So we have been discussing this all along our sessions, that as far as the prophets of God are concerned, those who become messengers, they not only convey the message of God, but they also convey it in a conclusive way, in a definite and a final way, and in to such an extent, we can say that the opponents, the adversaries, they are left with no excuse to deny it except stubbornness and arrogance. And when this happens, this is what we call as itmamul hujjah, or conclusive communication of the truth to the adversaries of a messenger of God. And then if they still deny and are adamant on their denial and rejection, then they face consequences. And these consequences, in the case of people who adhere to polytheism, is that they are put to death, and this is the fate that they will have in the hereafter also, because polytheism is unforgivable, and in this world it also becomes unforgivable if people adhere to it intentionally, deliberately, and knowing that it is not true. And it was this instance that had arisen in the times of Prophet Muhammad also, that the idolaters of Mecca, they very well knew, once the truth had been conclusively conveyed to them, that polytheism has absolutely no grounds. It is something that they are doing because their forefathers were doing something. It has no proof, and now they will face the consequences. But What is now very important is something that you can see in the next verses, which are appended, and it says that the believers, they should become helpers of God, the way Jesus, son of Mary, when he was called to his to his office, he was also similarly required to deliver the truth in a conclusive way, and he had asked his disciples. We know that he had 12 very famous disciples to follow him and to follow his ways and deliver the truth to other people. And it is on at this instance that he had said that, who is my helper for the cause of God? And his disciples actually said, Nahnu Ansarullah, that we are your helpers. So this is something which is now presented as an example to the believers also, that now that the time has come for their own persons to be God's helpers, they should follow the example set by Prophet Jesus and his companions and his disciples. And in a similar way, the companions should also respond to the call made by the Prophet and, of course, by the Almighty. The thing that we have to remember here is the word nusra. Nasr or nusra, as we know in Arabic, means to help and to support. So basically, this is one of the requirements of faith, a contingent requirement. It's not a permanent requirement, it's a contingent requirement of faith, that whenever religion needs our help, whether it is through the pen, whether it's through the sword, whether it's through education, whether it's through building mosques, whether it's through printing religious literature, whether it's to uh, create institutions that produce scholars of Islam. So all these are ways in which we can help religion whenever it needs this help. And today, of course, this help is much needed. So this is one of the requirements of our faith. Not only do we need to profess faith in God and do righteous deeds, these are, of course, the permanent requirements of faith, but one contingent requirement of faith which arises when the occasion arises is that we have to support and help the cause of God. And this support and help and cause of God is a requirement of our faith. If we do not think about it, if we do not attempt it, then we would be failing our faith. So in our own times, taking cue from these verses, we have to assess wherever we are, whether we are living in Asia, in Australia, in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, wherever we live, we have to assess that what exactly is the support that I can lend to my religion, where exactly is that support needed. And this, of course, could be different for different societies, for different cultures, for different areas. It's specific to the circumstances of that area. But the thing is that this is something that we all need to think and sit about and put our heads together, that wherever religion is in this need, in this support, then we have to provide that support. And the assessment could be a personal one, and everyone should think that this is a requirement of his faith or her faith. It's not of his or her faith is not complete unless this contingent requirement of faith is also fulfilled. Obviously, there could be a difference of opinion in this regard as well, and it need not be a collective decision. A person-to-person decision is also fine, and in this case, if there is a collective decision in which Muslims, for example, living in non-Muslim countries in a particular sector, in a particular city maybe, or a community, they think that, well, today this is the thing that we need to serve the cause of religion through. So they will then have to invest themselves, their persons, and their wealth for that cause. As I said, I mean, like building Islamic centers or catering for the education of our younger ones, or maybe printing religious literature, conversing with people who are not Muslims, conveying them the message of religion. So all these things, they fall in this ambit. Even building mosques on territories which are yet to have those mosques in large numbers, that would also be included in helping the cause of religion. So the thing that we have to understand is that this is our responsibility as believers. We now come to the next part of our study circle. This is Hadith that we will be studying, and this is from the Al-Jami Us-Sahih of Imam Muslim, and it says that Abu Huraira, it reports it says that God's messenger said, when any one of you sees someone who is blessed with more wealth and better physique, he should also see him who has lesser wealth and physique. So again, this is something that Prophet of God, and of course the last Prophet of God, has said in a very, very unique way and in a very authoritative way and as well as a very effective way in which, of course, when we look at people who are more blessed than us, we tend to have this longing, we tend to have this feeling that, well, I am deprived, and such a person has a good appearance, he has wealth and money, fame, and all these things that we might not be having. So, one way to do away with this depressive feeling is that the Prophet of God has said that if you look at people who are better blessed in physique and wealth, then of course this yearning will not go away. On the other hand, try to look at people who are less blessed than you in physique, in appearance, and of course in wealth and resources. And this will make you thank God for what you have. But if you continue to look upwards, you will always feel that there is something missing in your life. You'll become a negative person. You'll become a person who's always brooding and complaining. But on the other hand, if you look at people who are less blessed than you, you'll find lots and lots of people who are going through so many trials and tribulations, and they are passing through such stringent circumstances that when we look at them, when we see them, we should be having that feeling of immense gratitude welled up in our eyes, in our feelings, I would say, everywhere, because this tells us that God is still looking after us, and if He has given some others more than what we think that we have, then of course it should not be in any way regarded that God is happier with them or God is more pleased with them, because wealth and appearance and all these things that we have, they are basically a trial from God. They are a test from God. And if we fail in this test, if we fail in this trial, then of course we could be doomed eternally. And this is something that we have to understand, that God's blessings, they abound everywhere. It's just a question of opening our eyes. If we look around us, the sun, the moon, the stars, the wind, the seas, all these elements of nature, they serve us and they give us this example, and they teach us this lesson that God Almighty is looking after us, and He has made all these elements of nature subservient to us. He has put them into our service. And more than that, we have extended family, we have a normal body on most occasions, we have friends and a whole bunch of people who look after us, who care for us, who are affectionate to us. And of course, if we are deprived of some thing that we might long for, then again, we have to look at what we have. So it's as simple as what Quran has also said, that you have to keep counting your blessings. You need to always look at what you have, then to look at other people who have what you don't. And this will make you a person who's always positive, who's always thinking that this is what I have, and I have to make the best out of my abilities, the best out of my circumstances, the best out of the situation that I have been put into, and not complain, not brood, because this is not going to lead me anywhere. Brooding, complaining, this is something that's just is going to make a person even more negative, and this will not in any way help his cause to become a person who can do what can be done in the circumstances that he or she has been put in. Remember, it's not by choice that we have those circumstances. These circumstances, whether good or bad, they are from God, and they are meant to test our mettle. The Almighty is choosing certain souls, certain individuals, to lodge them in eternal blessings and eternal pleasure, and who knows that He might be having some assignment for them as well, who reach that blessed place. And but for the moment, what we need to do is that we need to strive to reach that place, and as much as we can, always realize that God's blessings, they abound, they are everywhere. We just need to open our eyes, and we just need to be individuals who thank God in all circumstances. Next, we go on to the segment about the Bible, and today we are going to read a verse from the book of Proverbs. This was revealed to Prophet Solomon. Of course, we know he was the son of Prophet David, to whom the Psalms, or the Zabur as the Quran calls it, was revealed. The book of Proverbs is also found today in the anthology that we call the Bible. So, chapter number 12, verse 18, it reads like this: There are some whose uncontrolled talk is like the wounds of a sword, but the tongue of the wise makes one well again. A very simple and a very beautiful sentence which tells us that how a tongue, your conversation, can make or break a relationship. It is our conversation, it is the way we talk and what we talk and how we talk is going to ultimately decide our relationships and how we can hold them as best as we can. So this the fact that the wound of the sword is less deeper than the wound of the tongue, or the wound of the tongue is more deeper than the wound of the sword, is something of an acknowledged, it's like an acknowledged reality. And the source of this acknowledged reality is actually this excerpt from the book of Proverbs of Prophet Solomon, that we have to understand that our words, they have a very, very important impact. The impact that they create on our surroundings, on our friends, on our foes, it could be immense. We could win a foe if we use our speech and conversation correctly, and we can lose a friend if we are not politically correct in our speech, if are always we have always given ourselves up to loose talk. So loose talk is something that, I mean, it might have a place in our lives, a small place, I would say, but if we continue to indulge in loose talk without realizing if it's the appropriate time, opportune moment to indulge in it or not, we might break the heart of people. We might make other people realize that they are lesser than us, inferior than us, and this advertent or inadvertent humiliation is going to really widen the gap between ourselves. So the most important thing is that we have to be careful in our speech, we have to be careful in our conversation, and the best way to do that is to have control. And as the famous proverb once again goes, that you have to look before you leap and to think before you speak. So you have to think before you speak, and that is something of paramount importance. People who don't think before they speak, they often end up in hot waters. They often end up at times regretting what they said, because they don't stop, they don't reflect, they don't deliberate, and they are impetuous. And it's like saying something on impulse. Such impulsive people realize soon that they have done something really wrong. And it's difficult to, I mean, it's always easy to make friends, but it's difficult to remake them once you have lost them. So the important thing is that we have to always slow down our process of conversation, of reaction, of giving a response. This is the most important thing, because you see, this wound that we often cause through our tongue is because of a reaction that we have. The blood boils up, the adrenaline kicks in, and we think that we have to immediately reply to a person's remark, or maybe his anger or her anger, and then it's like a spiral that starts off, and it's not, it does not end, because now people, they start to argue one after the other, and they don't find the space even to disentangle themselves. So the most important thing here is that we have to take a breath, slow down before we respond, before we react. And it's just a question of time to delay our reaction, because the blood that has built up in us and the reaction that we have had is like a impulse that is going to shoot like this, and in a few moments it's just going to come down. So we need to calm down, or not show our reaction in that time of impulse. If that is something that we can control, then we can be pretty organized in our conversation. We can be pretty pinpointed, and also be in a position to make the other person feel comfortable, make that person relaxed, and also make that person realize that we are not at all at daggers drawn with him or her. We are not in any sort of competition. We are friends with one another. We can fall back on one another, and our conversation is something that can always lead to better options, to better frontiers. And the best would be that that friendship is always maintained and sustained. But if we throw caution to the wind, if we don't realize that our words can really, really pierce the hearts of people, then this is a lesson. If it is learned later on in life, it will only hasten to make us alone in this whole arena, in this whole campus of people. We would be surrounded by people, but we would have no friends, because they would stay away from us. They would always feel that if they come closer to us, the impetuousness that is in ourselves, the reaction which is in ourselves, might damage them. And hence, as a policy, They tend to stay away from us, which of course is not good at all. We now come to the third or fourth, in fact, segment of today's study circle, and this is like a moderated discussion. And the topic today is basically, is honesty really the best policy? Of course, the age-old adage, the age-old proverb is that honesty is the best policy, of course, implying the fact that come what may, in whatever circumstances you are in, you have to be honest and true to your intention. You have to be sincere. But the question is that when we are honest, when we are sincere, when we are true, and in our intentions, then more often than not, we end up at the bottom of the ladder. We end up at the bottom of the society in many occasions, on many occasions, and of course, this then questions this whole policy or this whole proverb that should we really be honest? Because honesty should be something that should actually result in more comfort, result in more reward. But it seems that honesty, at least, it does not always pay off in this world. Over to you, Mariam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Now, I think with the part that you talked about being at the bottom of the ladder, if you're being honest, I think that applies to some places and not to other places. Like some countries, yes, if you're more honest, definitely it seems like you will end up at the bottom of the ladder. However, I think that you have to keep in mind, just like with your every action, why are you doing such an action? Are you doing it for the pleasures of this world, or are you doing it because you see a greater picture after this world? And that will really help you decide in situations where to be honest or not. Another way I want to tackle this topic is that some people, they equate honesty to being rude or unkind in the way you're being honest. So, for example, you want to critique someone or, try to teach them something that'll be to their benefit. But they think that if you're rude or harsh in the way you're saying it, as long as you're saying the honest words that are coming from your heart, it's going to be fine. And I disagree with that highly, because I don't think you need to be mean or rude to be honest. So you can still be very critical of a person, but you have to say it in a nice way. Because otherwise, that's just defeating the purpose. The likelihood of that person even thinking about what they've done or are doing is going to decrease if you're just going to be more mean to them. So with that, I'm not seeing any more raised hands. Oh, let's go. Bismillah Tirmizi Ahmed, would you like to share your view?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. Assalamu alaikum, Mariam. So, my thought on this is that if you can't show tough love to people, when honesty is required, and if you just keep going about it in a way where you keep thinking that I just have to kind of help them not feel bad or kind of lead them to the truth, but make sure they don't feel bad, then sometimes I feel tough love is required. So if you're going to be honest with people who are close to you, and, I don't know, that's what I think. I don't know if I'm wrong or right. So yeah, that's my comment on it, that I think tough love is sometimes important.
So, what would you say that is, if I ask you a simple yes or a no, what would you say to this question, that is honesty really the best policy?
I think it is, but sometimes I feel it leads to conflicts also. So sometimes I'm not sure, Dr. Saleem. Actually, I feel honesty sometimes just better to be quiet and not given an opinion, which I feel is a horrible thing, especially if you're an outspoken person. If you can't talk about the things that are important to you, but sometimes I feel it just sounds more idealistic than it actually is. So I'm not sure.
Right. And Mariam, what do you say about this? That if I ask you a simple yes or a no, what would you say?
I will choose option 3. It really depends. Sometimes I think that being honest is absolutely unwarranted and you don't need to be
Mm-hmm.
honest in everything, because I
Mm-hmm.
think you need to be wise at all
Mm.
times. And
Correct.
sometimes with wisdom means silence is golden, and other times it means that you need to speak out. So
Mm-hmm.
if there is somebody else on the line where your honesty is going to affect them, your dishonesty is going to affect them in a negative way, then you must absolutely speak out. But then that comes more with justice. Again, to me, you don't need to be honest all the time, but it really
Mm-hmm.
depends what the consequences of being honest or dishonest means. And sometimes you notice things, but you don't need to say anything. You just notice it and you let it go, especially if it's like a one off thing. For example,
Mm-hmm.
say you see
Mm-hmm.
somebody behaving in a strange way one day, but it's
Mm-hmm.
how that person is usually. You know what their
Mm-hmm.
usual personality is. It just could be that they're having an absolutely terrible day. And then that
Mm-hmm.
day, you don't need to be honest with them. You need to be empathetic towards them. You need to be
Mm-hmm.
compassionate. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question with a simple yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Well, the reason that I asked this question in the form of a simple yes or no was that, you see, if you measure the consequences of your honesty in this world, I mean, if you have this yardstick that, well, if honesty does not pay off, then I should not be honest. This is the thing that actually is in the minds of many people who think that if honesty is not going to pay them off in this world, and if it's not going to be of any benefit to them, even if their conscience tells them to be honest, then it is not a lucrative thing to do. And so they measure the outcome of things through moral principles. So it is here that I think we have to understand. So what you two have just said is, I mean, is correct. Nevertheless, I mean, we have to choose wise words. We have to choose the moment. It's not always essential to speak out, but whenever we do speak out, it has to be based on honesty. I mean, we can withhold our expression. We can withhold giving an opinion for various reasons, and that is understandable. But whenever we have to give an opinion, it should not be in any way based on dishonesty, because we think that if I'm honest today, then maybe my someone might get angry with me. Maybe my father, my mother, my son, my daughter, he or she would not be comfortable, or I might lose something, or I might not gain the consequences of a good behavior. So I think that if you start measuring honesty through this yardstick, which becomes problematic, and that is why we have to understand that this world is an imperfect place. You don't, or you will never get rewarded fully or punished fully for what you have done always. I mean, yes, sometimes this may be possible. And this imperfection of the world actually is something that makes us realize that there is another world attached to it. And that is the Quran, why the Quran always says that we have created things in pairs, so that you can remember that if this world by itself is incomplete, so just as a man is incomplete without a woman, we don't have a complete concept of a human being. The sun without the moon, the night without the day, I mean, and similarly the sky without the earth. So these are very blatant pairs. So in a very similar situation, this world also has a pair, and this pair actually tells us, or this member of the pair tells us, that there is something lacking in it. And unless the other member of the pair is considered together, the vacuum that is created by one, or the gap that is created by one, seems to be, I mean, it cannot be filled in any way. And then, of course, it seems that what exactly is the purpose then? So the reason is that, of course, we have to understand that complete honesty will pay off in the hereafter. I mean, if you start measuring honesty in a way that you'd like to gain the reward of that honesty, all of it in this world, that it is here that it becomes problematic, especially if you know that this is something that is against this basic structural belief regarding the hereafter. So, I mean, at times, in spite of believing in the hereafter, also we still tend to be. I mean, we do the same thing. We still think that as if there is not going to be any hereafter, and if I'm going to suffer in this world, why should I be honest? So in that case, what happens is that in spite of believing in the fact that I mean, I'm going to be fully judged in the hereafter, because of that weak faith, maybe, or that weak belief, it makes me elusive I elude it. I just become oblivious to it and start thinking of immediate worldly gain. So one of the things that the Quran has said and previous scriptures, that this immediate gain that you'd like, immediate benefit for any good deed that you have done, which drives a person, is something that makes him decide whether that immediate gain is going to come or not. And if he or she thinks that immediate gain is not going to come, then what good is it to be honest? So it is here that we have to check ourselves, that one approach is in which we realize that this world is imperfect. This world is not a place in which you are going to be rewarded. This world is a place in which it is quite possible that honesty might lead to a very tough life. I mean, this is something. However, if we don't have this worldview and we think that this world is all that there is, then obviously, I mean, I think honesty, of course, would not be the best policy. And in that case, every moral act should be governed by the benefit it carries or not. So you see, there's a fundamental difference of approach in both cases. One mindset will approach it in a different way, the other mindset will approach it in another way. And then we also have, as I said, the third or the weaker mindset, who actually believes that there is going to be an hereafter, but because of that lack of strength in that belief, they become, they sort of go the other way, and they don't realize that, well, there is going to be a day in which honesty is going to really pay them back, and pay them back in a way that they would not even have imagined.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have more raised hands now by participants. Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Dr. Shehzad, I agree with you. Honesty, one should always be honest. But I also feel that if you are telling somebody off honestly, somebody you think has done something wrong, you have to be very wise in choosing your words. You can be honest with your children, your family, your friends, but if you decide to rebuke them and to make them feel miserable because they have done something wrong, then the whole purpose of your being honest is lost. So I think anybody who's sincere would talk gently and point out things without getting aggressive and trying to sort of show that, okay, this, you did something wrong and you're going to be punished, because I think that in the long run doesn't pay off. This is the way I feel. I don't know what
Yes,
you think of this way.
I think that's a very good point that you have made, and that is something that we had yet to discuss. I mean, we were just discussing the consequence of honesty or dishonesty, but nevertheless, this is a point well taken, that while being honest, one has to be wise as well, and one has to choose the words very carefully and the right time also. So, honesty does not mean that you have to be aggressive. Honesty does not mean that you have to be impudent or in any way disrespectful. In fact, it is something in which you have to be extremely wise, very well chosen words, very gentle words. But as we have often said, that our stance can be firm without our tongue being harsh. So that is the bottom line. That if you have a if you have a soft tongue and you speak softly, it's not a question of being weak in that case, because in spite of showing that toughness in your words, you have to show it in your stance. So I think that is something that, I mean, it's inevitable that we have to agree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bisma, please go ahead.
So, Dr. Saab, how does honesty with the self in this equation? What about, honesty with the self? So, I think, if we were to kind of expand on this discussion, that honesty with the self is the most important thing before we can be honest with other people. Is that something we leave for the judgment at the end of, our life, or for the hereafter? You know, how does that play into this?
Could you give an example in which?
So, I've realized to come lots of times as we become older, to come to peace with ourselves, we need to be honest about our past. If we cannot accept, the follies that we have committed, or the relationships we may have had, and the baggages we carry, sometimes, we put people on pedestals from our past and kind of ape the same kind of behavior, thinking that we are being, right. But first we have to learn to be honest with ourselves and tell ourselves that, maybe, the yardstick of God is, I feel, he's very black and white in a lot of ways. when somebody's good or somebody's bad. That's what I've at least understood. So what about honesty with the self? How does that play into it?
I think
You know,
that's also something very important. But you see, honesty, if it takes the form of a confession of something before your own self is concerned, then that is something which is extremely, I would say, warranted and extremely required. But you need not be. I mean, you don't have to confess all the things before other people on all occasions. It also depends on the situation and all on what are the circumstances. Yes, to be honest with your own self would mean that you confess, acknowledge, and fully know what was done in the past, whether rightly or wrongly, and you take responsibility of your actions, especially if they are wrong. And that's like taking stock of your situation and realizing that if something was done amiss or something was done wrongly in the past, then it has to be in some way remedified. So that remedies, of course, starts off with the fact that you accept what has happened. You come out of that
uh,
denial, because one of the things that really plagues us is that denial. The denial part is something that it stays with us because we don't accept what has happened. So acceptance is something that has to take place at all costs. Otherwise, that itself is a baggage. Itself is a burden on our conscience. The sooner we get away, I mean, just we do away with it, the better.
okay, thank you so much, Dr. Saleem.
Thank you very much. Like to request more participants if they'd like to participate. We're discussing, is honesty really the best policy? And to participate, you can raise your hand. Bisma,
Okay.
please go ahead.
Yes. So, Dr. Saleem, I have, while this discussion's been going on, I've been thinking more and more. I have really suffered for being honest. Sometimes I feel that yes, we tell ourselves that the hereafter we'll be rewarded, and yes, keeping that in mind, we continue, kind of gently or in a wise way, as Mariam had said. It's wonderful to hear that Mariam, at this young age, you can be this wise. It took me a few years to become wise, but it backfires a lot. So are we to always keep that in mind, that the hereafter is when we'll be rewarded, or are we supposed to kind of just stop giving an opinion on things because it kind of backfires? And especially I feel in my profession, being a journalist, it's difficult because we hear opinions or we get badgered for honesty a lot of times. So what is one to do?
I think this is a special case when a person is a journalist or maybe a politician or maybe a public figure. Then you have to pick and choose, as we just said earlier on, that not every occasion is the occasion to say something. I mean, to be honest is one thing, and to be quiet is another thing. At times you have to be quiet, which does not mean that you are being dishonest. It only means that you think that any honesty expressed at this occasion will be perceived in a wrong way or will lead to some other problem. So this is something that you have to weigh, that if you think that the thing that you need to convey is so important that it might negatively affect you, but you still take the chance to do that. That is one approach. And another approach is because the thing itself is something that you think that if you express it the way it should be expressed, then it will be counterproductive. It's not going to be received in the right way. The perception is going to be different. So I think this is a decision that is a value judgment that a person who is under the sword at that moment, so to speak, is the one who should decide. And yes, at times you take a wrong decision, but then this is what experience is all about, that you have to learn from your mistakes also.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Saleem.
Thank you. We have in chat somebody saying that sometimes lying about your own opinion to prevent disagreement or long-winded discussion about your opinion, especially if it's an unconventional opinion, is something that people go through. So they choose to not be honest so that they don't have to go into. Again, I think it comes back to wisdom of like, is this the
Yes.
moment? Are these the right
Yeah.
people for me to have?
Correct. So I mean, you can just sidetrack the whole discussion. At times, you need not be. I mean, you have to pick and choose your audience. You have to understand that at times, what you say is not going to be understood by the other person. So it's perfectly fine to just sidetrack the whole discussion, to just bypass it, maybe, or to raise a new topic. All these things we do. So it's a question of wisdom, as you've said rightly. And I think if you don't have any more raised hands, we can spend the last 15 minutes on our general questions.
Are we going until are we doing
9
1
o'clock.
hour?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So starting with the Q&A, our first question asks, is it that when God tells us to stand with the truth, he is asking for truth in matters of faith and religion? Because in business and personal matters, we should not lie as a rule. But of course, one has to lie when sometimes when we're trying to be socially polite.
Well, I think this is again a matter of your conscience being the best judge. At times, yes, this has to be the policy. You might need to mince some words and without lying, actually. So this is something that is a choice at your hands. And as I said, the best would be your own conscience to judge.
Thank you very much. The next question asks, this world isn't just because of humans. As humans, I think they mean Prophet Muhammad, lied about Sarah being his sister. Is this correct? Prophet
No, this is
Musa,
about Prophet
sorry.
Abraham. This is Prophet Abraham, actually. So, I mean, this never happened. This is just cited in a narrative. And that is a biblical narrative, and it is hardly true. You'll find
Um,
this being cited in Bible history. If you look at the book of Genesis, it says that Abraham had to pose his wife to be his daughter, to be his sister, because the king that they were going to pass through the land, if they were told that she is the sister of someone, then he would spare that woman and not confiscate her. But if he would know that that girl or a woman is the wife of someone, then he would confiscate her. So it is reported that Abraham had to lie because he said, as Sarai, as she's called in the Bible, that Sarah or Sarai, she is not his wife, he's his sister. So, I mean, this is something which is not true at all on the one hand, but it also calls to question one point, and that is that when there is a situation in which, I mean, it's a life-threatening situation, or a situation in which your honor is at stake, as this could be one example, then that lying is done to save you from a bigger problem. For example, if it's a life-threatening situation, if someone comes or as a to your house and asks you where your money is, and he's a robber, and you need not tell the truth to that person. So these are situations in which your own conscience tells us that if you're lying, it's for a bigger cause, and that cause is not going to any way affect any person wrongly. Another example that comes to my mind is that at times we have to convey the death of someone to an elderly person, and we don't immediately break the news. We prepare that person by telling her or him that, well, such and such a person has fallen very sick, and actually he might have passed away. So we build up, we try to prepare that the situation, the ground, so that it does not become a shock for the person. So you see, these are things that are also called white lies. They are not harmful in any way. I mean, the way lies are. So I do think that in such circumstances, if we look the other way, so to speak, that would not be wrong.
Just for further clarification, what if there are situations where, say, a person has been sexually abused or sexually violated, and in
Hmm.
that case, when it comes to their future, where they have to now uh, to their partner, like if their partner asks something or their potential partner asks something, uh, would that be a lie to say, "Hey, no, nothing happened in my past," or is
No, I
it
think that
better to be
that should be
honest?
disclosed. If the question has been pointedly asked by the potential fiance or the spouse, then you should not lie in that matter, because it would be lying, I think. And again, as I said, this could be something very subtle as well to some other people. In very specific circumstances, this could be something that they think that, well, everything has been taken care of, and if I tell the truth, then the whole marriage will be in jeopardy. So, I mean, this could be one approach, but I mean, it all depends on the situation in which, if that whatever you conceal, once it is exposed, and the person then comes back to you and gets back to you that, why did you lie to me in the first place? then it is here that you have to be prepared for some big, very, very genuine excuse for that. But I think in normal circumstances, specifically if something like this has happened in your past and your potential spouse or fiance uh, makes this question or directs this question to yourself, I would personally feel that the truth must be told.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, is swearing within your thoughts bad?
Swearing within your thoughts.
Yes.
I mean, depends what you're swearing about. And I mean, if you're not swearing
No,
for
I
other
think it's
people,
like cussing in your thoughts.
yeah, cursing in your thoughts. I know. To curse someone in your thought, to curse yourself, or maybe curse other people. I mean, it all depends who you're cursing. I mean, you can curse yourself, but cursing other people, even if your thoughts are concerned, that too should be avoided, because you remember we have to be pure in our thoughts, in our actions both. So it's not just the actions which count; our thoughts also count. So I would not suggest that you should do that.
Thank you very much. The next question asks, is lying for the cause of spreading good deeds like Hadith fabricators did in the past justifiable? And will God judge people with punishment for they made good people do good deeds using fabricated hadiths, or would God reward them because their intention was good?
I think this would be a big lie, because you see, when you are saying something uh, on the authority of the Prophet, something which he never said, this, I mean, is going to be counted as a lie, come what may, because we don't have any authority to say something on behalf of the Prophet, even on behalf of anyone, what someone has not said. And it becomes even more grave when you are saying something on the authority of religion, and that is something that is going to make or break things or be a cause of reward or punishment. So what you're doing is effectively calling people towards certain things which the Quran or authentic narratives have not done so. So it's like creating a new religion or inducting some new things in religion, and I would certainly not advise in this favor.
Thank you very much. Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, we were talking about life-threatening situations, and you are exempt if you tell a lie there. But there are also other situations like dispute between siblings, which
Hmm.
are sometimes very ferocious. And
Hmm.
if you act as a mediator and going to one of the siblings, and she's cursing or he's cursing the other sibling, and when you go to the other sibling and he asks, is it proper if you say no, she was not saying anything much about you, and try and evade the question? Because if you tell him or her what the other was saying in reality, that would
Hmm.
aggravate the situation. But in order to reconcile them, could you be a little mild in telling them about what the other person said? Would that count
Yes,
as
I should think so. That should be okay. When you're trying to reconcile, when you're trying to bring two people together, and even if you have to say something which is not the case, because the ultimate purpose is to bring two hearts
reconcile?
together, two people who have, I mean, have a rift between one another. So that could be two friends, it could even be the husband and the wife. So in that case, this is something if you do in order to bring them together, because now the purpose of that lie is not to conceal of something so that it's going to harm someone. So remember, lying becomes a sin when the concealment or the wrong statement is going to give uh, or raise a situation or make a situation look as if something wrong has happened or some loss has occurred to someone. So I don't think this happens in such cases when you're trying to bring two people together.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very much. Ammar Rasul, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Walaikum assalam.
Dr. Saab, I wanted to ask you about this hadith. Woe to him who tells things speaking falsely to make people laugh. Woe to him, woe to him. This is Abu Dawood 4990. Uh, I understand this to be
Hmm.
about people lying to make their friends maybe laugh or just sort of like, tell a good story.
Hmm.
And sir, I do this all
Yes,
the
I
time.
think
And
you need to understand
so
our
is
hadith
this a big
in
sin?
a no. I think that you have to understand all hadiths in a way that they are always situational. There is some context to it. They are not never generalized statements, because it's not that Prophet sat down one day and started to deliver lectures. So what the impression that we get when we read a hadith, especially if it's in the form of a saying, that as if the Prophet stopped one day, he gathered people and started to give this counsel to them. So this never happens in the times of the Prophet. These are basically situational statements in which at times the whole context is not related. People who just pass by, they pick up a few words, a few sentences, and they start narrating. So I do understand when but this hadith, if it is to be true, isnad wise, we have to check the isnad. But let's just suppose that it is correct as far as its description is concerned. I would think that there is an element of immorality in that must have been implied, because merely making people laugh on jokes, there's nothing wrong with that, unless there is some vulgarity, something which is untoward. So that particular part has to be supposed. Because if you see, as I said, our hadiths are always situational. They are, I mean, whenever they say something, it can never be based out of the Quran in any way, or common sense, or established history. So, I mean, making other people laugh, we know there's nothing wrong with it. So, if the Prophet said something about it, then there must be some additional element which the narrator has missed out, or maybe which has lost its narration over the course of the whole hadith.
Ammar, you can go ahead and ask your clarification or follow-up question.
Okay, no, I had another question because Dr. Sahab has answered this question very beautifully.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Sahab, I wanted to ask you about this ayat that I came across. It says, do not consume one another's wealth unjustly, nor deliberately bribe authorities in order to devour a portion of others' property, knowing that it is a sin. So I wanted to ask you, does this apply to politicians these days, or public land sometimes given away to other countries, or to other departments, government departments, for very little and just wasted?
Well, that itself is something wrong, but it does not come under this verse, I would say. The verse actually is La taqulu amwalakum bainakum bil batil wa tudlu biha ilal hukam li taqulu fariqam min amwalin nas. So it actually is referring, in the first part, it is referring to the fact that any illegal transaction like gambling, like interest, and other things that might cause harm or deceit to people should be avoided. So that is aklul amwal bil batil, consuming something through evil means. And the second part of this verse is actually referring to illegal gratification, which is called rishwa or rishwat in our language as well. So to bribery is something that is being implied in the second part. But when you sell off something, or maybe use that land at a cheaper price, or throw a price to gain some other benefit, obviously that itself is something that is a matter of dishonesty and wrong statement of facts. So yes, looking at it this way, you can maybe bracket it with the first part, which says that do not consume wealth unjustly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The next question asks, in a lecture you mentioned that saying that God's attributes are meant to inspire us, and also we should embody those traits as much as possible, for example, being merciful to others. Wouldn't that mean that we should also aim to become very powerful?
And I did not say this about all the attributes. So there are some attributes which are just specific to God and which we cannot emulate in any way. But there are other attributes that we need to follow. For example, justice, for example, mercy, for example, wisdom. But power is something that is not something. I mean, if it is acquired through natural means, I mean, because this is something which we have to understand. It's not a personal trait. It's always a trait that you acquire. But for God, it's like a personal trait. He does not need to acquire power. He's already powerful. So that is not implied in here. So what we are referring to are traits which are self-present or self-acquired. They are already there. You're already merciful. You're already wise. You're already just by your instincts. All that you need to do is be more sharp and take cue from God.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the questions today. Thanks to all the participants for a wonderful discussion and a great Q&A. Inshallah, we'll see you all tomorrow in another session of textual study of the Quran. And until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.